I want to get to some expert insight now to take a much closer look at the situation and what could possibly happen next.
Joining us now is Joshua Ederheimer, who is currently an assistant professor at UVA and has had an extensive career at the DOJ and with MPD. We thank you for joining us and lending your expertise here. You know, there are a lot of layers to this story. What happened today is a dramatic escalation in these ICE operations. What can you tell us about DHS and their standards when it comes to use of force rules?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to note that overlaying all of this are some serious politics. So you have the federal government sending in its law enforcement officers to a jurisdiction where the governor and the mayor have publicly said they don't want them. So tension is already high, and that's permeating this whole atmosphere. The way the DHS works is they follow the law as it relates to use of force. So each agency in DHS, including ICE, has its own set of use of force rules and guidelines, but they're all connected to Supreme Court decisions. And those decisions really focus on the reasonableness of the use of force. And that's how this is going to be evaluated.
Joshua, we know that law enforcement is trained to also try and de-escalate situations. Obviously, though, that has to be weighed against the officer's safety. Can you talk to us about how split-second these decisions can be?
Well, they're immediate, and everybody is watching whatever videos have been released online and making some determinations about that, and that is just not the way it works. Because think about yourself in any situation when a car in front of you hits its brakes. The adrenaline in your body, it affects you. It's the same with law enforcement officers on the street. They're in a tense situation, and they don't know what the person in the vehicle is thinking, doing, their level of threat, and there's fast, overt action. We're dealing with human beings here, including the law enforcement officers who are human beings.
Mm-hmm. There is an incredible amount of emotion with what has happened. This is a flashpoint here. What does this mean for local police agencies? How might this impact policing in other areas, say, just like right here in the DC metro?
Well, keeping in mind that in Minneapolis, that's ground zero for questioning police authority. George Floyd occurred in that city. His murder occurred in that city. So there's already some underlying tension in Minneapolis as it relates to law enforcement. George Floyd's murder impacted all of law enforcement, frankly, around the world. Creates tension, and it does kind of chip away at public trust of the police. But just something to keep in mind here. These are federal law enforcement officers. They are trained and are lawfully present in Minneapolis, so they're allowed to be there. It's lawful for them to be there. They're enforcing laws that have been on the books. So there's no question that they have authority and the right to be there. I think the question for local law enforcement is when the federal agents come in, it's how they're enforcing and where they're enforcing. And that's what's not been experienced in local communities in the past. And I think this is creating the tension with law enforcement, and it feeds into perceptions of the local police.
So then, Joshua, if I can, one final question here. Do you think that scaling back is the right strategy, as the governor and the mayor have demanded, or is it increasing the numbers? Because remember, after the National Guard members were shot in Washington, D.C. last month, the Pentagon and the White House quickly said, hey, we're going to send another 500 troops into the district. Is there a right answer here that's obvious to you?
I don't think surging or pulling back is really the answer. What brought me a little pause, as someone who had investigated police shootings, I've personally investigated about 50 of them when I was an official with the DC police. I was really concerned about the mayor's comments, his use of profanity, and the use of the word terrorists. That is really inflaming the situation. I think Governor Walz and Bob Jacobson is the director of public safety for the state of Minnesota. They're preaching calm. They're talking about accountability and review. But I think we need a little bit calmer, mature leadership. And I am concerned about the mayor. I know he's got a constituency, but I think the rest of the state should look to the governor and the Commissioner of Public Safety for how to proceed.
Well, a lot to unpack with this story. We absolutely thank you for your very thoughtful perspective today, pointing to a lot of elements that we really need to tap into in the days and weeks ahead in our coverage. Thank you so much, Joshua Ederheimer from UVA, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Be sure